So all of our slab pieces are dry and ready to be built with. Once again, remember, you don't want them to be entirely dry. You just want them to be able to hold their own weight and not flop over as you try to build with them. There should still be a little bit of flexibility to them. So now that I've got all my pieces dry and I'm ready to assemble them, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some sort of clay tool and I'm going to cut each of the corners at a 45-degree angle. There's a bunch of different tools you can do to make this happen. I like using the metal ribs or the Kevins. And see, I'm just cutting that top corner piece off. The Kevins work really nice for this. You can also use a loop tool of various sizes or shapes. One trick that I've discovered is if I hold my thumb at the end of where I'm cutting, it'll make a cleaner cut at the corner. Without holding that thumb, sometimes the end likes to get a little broken and jagged. So that was using a big loop tool. It also works with a ribbon tool. Depending on which ribbon tool you use, you might have to go back and trim the edges a little bit further. The angle to cut with them is also a little weird sometimes, depending on which shape of ribbon you get. You can use a mini ribbon tool in some instances. Our pieces are large enough that I wouldn't use the mini loop tool on this project. So why was it important to cut all of the corners? If you were to just take uncut slabs and start to build with them, at some point it's going to throw your measurements off because you're lining things up on sides rather than meeting directly at the corners. By cutting our corners, all of our measurements stay intact and things meet nicely at each edge. So now that I have all my corners trimmed and I'm ready to go, you're going to want to make sure you have a number of things. Make sure you have a water dish and a sponge. You're going to want some sort of container of slip and a tool to score up all the edges. And I find it really handy to have a nice soft piece of extra clay to just reinforce as I'm building. So I'm going to start by joining 3 pieces together. It's easier if you try to join 2 of your walls, your first 2 walls, to the base all at one time. Then they can kind of lean on each other for support as you attach everything else. So go ahead and rough up all of the sides really well. Remember, when you're scoring, you really want to take out all of your angst and anger on those edges. Really rough up the clay, because those crumbly bits are what's going to help hold everything together. So really make sure that you're roughing up the area. Don't just softly prick it. Really rough it up all the way around. So now that I have scored all of my edges, I'm going to put some slip on the first two sides on the base. And then also in the corner. So our pieces are strong enough that they are holding themselves together while I can go around and blend all of these seams in nicely. This is where I like to use that extra bit of soft clay. I can roll out myself a little worm and use it to help seal the insides of my seams a little cleaner. To make sure that everything is super firmly attached. Notice there's still a fair bit of bend and play in the walls. They are not perfectly dry. They're just dry enough that we can build with them. So we're going to go ahead and repeat that process with the next walls. Make sure you rough up the sides. Add your slip where you need it. And as you're going around sealing all of the corners and making sure your pieces fit well together, make sure you're spending time cleaning up the outside seams as well as the inside seams. And let's get our last wall on. Use a little bit of a worm to help join on the inside. Make sure that we're smoothing out the corners on the outside as well. And then we'll add the top. Now, if you're making a box to serve as some sort of container and you're going to add a lid, do you necessarily need to have the top corners angled? No, not necessarily. You can, but it's not required. Just like the other sides, we'll make sure that we rough it up nice and thoroughly. Now notice once I add this one in, this one I'm not going to be able to add a little worm on the inside. It is my last piece. But that's fine. The rest should help hold it together. Now I'm going to spend a lot of time making sure that all of my seams are super well connected. I've got all of my sides put together, so they should hold on to each other and support each other fairly well. I'm going to start to make sure I'm putting it in different directions so that I can really make sure that all of my seams are as clean and finished as possible. Once you've fully secured all of the sides of your box, now you're free to start decorating with whatever additional adornments you need to add to finish out your project. Is this particular box at all finished? Absolutely not. Before I call it done and let it dry, I need to smooth a lot more. I need to go over some of the edges with water. I'm probably going to take my rib and smooth a lot more with my rib as well, because I really want all of my walls to be perfectly flat and all of my corners to be nice and sharp. And that's before I put any of my extra details on. But this should be enough to get you started. And remember, you're not limited to boxes. Boxes were just the simple example. You can build an infinite number of things with hard slabs. Just make sure that you measure out your slabs beforehand and really take the time to dry them just enough.